Welcome back. The National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, has released its inflation statistics for the month of May, and it's on a 0.49% increase from March's inflation rate of 33.20%. Nigeria's inflation rate rose to 33.69% in April as prices of food and non-alcoholic beverages soared.
Comparing year-on-year data, the inflation rate in April 2024 was 11.47%, points higher than in April 2023, where it stood at 22.22%. This indicates that the headline inflation rate has risen rather significantly over the past year. We're joined this morning by economist and analyst Segun Sopitan. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. So I think we'll probably just start with, when people talk about inflation rate and these figures, and we're talking about year on year, it sounds a little too complicated, but what does it mean when we're talking about 33% inflation in the most simple terms?
Well, putting it simply means that according to that data, the price that you paid this time last year, for bread has grown by 33%. That's so if you bought bread for 100 naira last year or 1,000 naira, you're buying it at 1,003 this year. That's what that means. And you can apply that across every other, whatever good and service that people, take part in. Unfortunately, the reality is that things are far worse than that. So the price of bread has doubled. It's 100% over the last 1 year, and the same applies to pretty much every other food item that you can talk about. And other goods and services as well. Mustn't forget that it's not just about food. So first of all, I think that it's absolutely critical that the NBS takes a look at its inflation computation methodology. They need to review this. It's absolutely critical because right now we're understating the reality. And if you're understating reality, you can't respond appropriately.
What's the effect of understating the reality?
Yeah, look, if you're saying to yourself that inflation is 33%, it's bad, because we should be in single digits. But if the reality is that your inflation rate is 60% or 70%, then you realize that, oh my goodness, I have hyperinflation. The inflation is out of control, and therefore the responses of government will be a crisis-driven response. Now it looks as if the government doesn't even realize we're in a crisis because, we've gone about policy making as though it's business as usual. Look at what the central bank has been doing. The CBN's one of its core mandates is price stability, controlling inflation. Right now the CBN governor shouldn't be doing anything else other than, rolling out measures, desperately trying to curtail this thing, but it's business as usual. And the CBN governor is even going about, there's some statements that he made that made this worse. Just about 3 weeks at the IMF spring meeting, the things he said there is actually the reason we're here. And I did warn against that at that time. And unfortunately, as usual, nobody would heed, So here we are.
So you first of all don't even believe that 33.69%?
Oh, no, absolutely not. It's way worse. And I think anybody that is involved in any part of economics or finance will agree with you on this, will agree with me on this. All the experts have said this. The basket of goods and services that we use to compute inflation has not been updated in over 10 years. So there are new services that didn't even exist 10 years ago whose prices are probably soaring faster than other things. You're not factoring them in. So the numbers that we're getting completely understate what our reality is. And, the citizens can feel the reality. I know how much a crate of egg was last year. This year is 4,500. As at last week, it was 2,005, a year ago. That's 100%.
At the best branch used to be 1,200.
Yeah, exactly. Just about a year. It's 5,000 naira now. So we're talking 300% on some items. We're talking 400% on some items. So there is no way inflation is 33%. We're joking. We're not serious.
Okay. So now you've talked about how some of the factors that have led to this would be the policies that we've made. Mm-hmm. Would you like to analyze some of the policies? Of course, the most popular ones everyone's talked about would be the subsidy and, of course, the there's one other.
The exchange rate.
Exchange rates, thank you, floating the naira, exactly. Yeah. So are those two the sole culprits to blame for where we are? Are there more?
Oh, there's more. So those two are the ones that triggered the crisis, the spiral. But before then, you remember that before this administration came on board, inflation was already, 20-something%. It was already too high. But when they came on and then, took subsidies out, floated the naira, things simply exploded. Before then, the other problem we have, if you look at money supply today, it's 92. I just checked. The last report from the CBN, as at March, it's 92 trillion naira. As at December 2022, it was 54 trillion. So it's doubled in about a year plus. That's inflation. There's no, because that's demand pull inflation. There's cost push, there's demand pull. So for the demand pull inflation, the money supply is way too high. And the CBN, the money supply is not responding to CBN's policy measures. The standard reaction to that is to increase MPR. So they've done that 6%, 600 basis points in the last 2 meetings. Nothing has changed. It's dropped from 95 trillion as at January. It's dropped to 92 trillion in March. So the increases have not resulted in the kind of abatement in money supply that we would need to have to also see demand pull inflation reduce. So there's that. But I think the real culprits are those two that you mentioned. It's the subsidy removal, grievous, deadly mistake, and the floating of the naira. Another very bad mistake. So
at that time, it didn't look like a mistake. It looked like then the forces of demand and supply would eventually, cause the naira to find its rate. But at that time, a number of economists were not saying what they're saying now. I'm even sure if I asked you at that time, you would have thought it was a fantastic idea.
I said exactly what I'm saying now.
Oh, right.
Exactly. I said it. I warned strenuously. Check, I warned on this station. I warned on every platform. Do not do this thing. If you do it, things are going to go out of control and, it will be difficult to bring it back. I said that there will be a collapse in fact we're going to run into a crisis, and I've been proven right. The reason is simple. Our economic fundamentals are too weak for you to release your economy to market forces. We simply don't have the strength at the foundation of our economy. There's poverty in the land. That poverty factor alone is supposed to be enough to make any, choosing my words carefully, any sensible policymaker to pause, to pause and factor that into everything you're trying to do. Because you're talking 133, by the government's own admission, 133 million Nigerians out of 200 million living in multi-dimensional poverty. You can't take subsidies out in an economy like that. Yeah. There will be a crisis. The United States of America, one of the most prosperous nations in the world today, still subsidizes food till today. The UK still subsidizes energy till today. So we've taken subsidies out of petroleum products. We do not have enough power supply, but we've taken subsidies out of that as well, just recently. Yes. Right? And then we floated our naira. And then when we floated our naira, the CBN says that we're having a managed float, which means that there will be occasional interventions to keep the range within a band. But then the central bank governor goes to an international meeting, the IMF no less, and says that no, we have no intention of defending the naira, that it will be willing buyer, willing seller, price discovery.
You shouldn't have said that.
That was a grievous error because there was an immediate reaction from foreign portfolio investors. They pulled their monies out, because we do not have hedge products in this country. The derivatives fund, the derivative market in Nigeria is not mature. It's not deep enough. So you can't get any futures. You can't get forwards. You can't get options or swaps, right? Those are the things that people would traditionally use to hedge their bets against a foreign currency fluctuation, So because we don't have that, it's important that the CBN, in its messaging, assures the public that they will do what they need to do to keep prices stable within a certain band. The CBN did exactly the opposite when the CBN governor spoke, and the reaction was immediate. The following week,
was it not because maybe
FPIs
at that
dropped.
time, because we saw that at that point the naira had gained for a certain
Absolutely.
period. Some money had been pumped into the
Absolutely.
economy. debts were being paid, and we're all excited.
Uh-huh.
And of course, a number of people had then started to politicize it, with some saying that, he's defending the naira from the external reserve. So was he not maybe saying that to sort of explain to them that this is not exactly what we're doing? And why, can you explain what happened at that time, where there was some temporary
gain on
Yeah, so there were some policy measures that the CBN had put in place that indeed attracted foreign portfolio investors, a bit of foreign direct investment, but not enough of that yet, and pushing for foreign remittances, diaspora remittances to come in. Those measures worked. So we saw a bump. It was a significant bump in FPI inflows compared to last year, 400% increase in FPI inflows into Nigeria in January, February, and March, right? So that had an impact on the exchange rate. Supply came in, which obviously affected price. And then another thing that the CBN did was intervening. So the CBNs intervened to the tune of about $600 billion in the first quarter of this year through the BDCs, where it pumped in about roughly, I think about $60 billion. Sorry, $60 million, very small, thereabouts. But then it intervened in the NAFEM, in the autonomous foreign exchange market, to the tune of about $500 million, right? So those interventions plus the inflows from FPIs resulted in the abatement that we saw. Now, when the CBN governor made that statement at the IMF, what immediately happened is that because there were no hedge products, foreign portfolio investors realized that they were running a risk remaining in this market, and they pulled out.
All right.
It crashed. And then, of course, so what that meant is that supply had reduced, so price will go up.
Yeah.
And
all right.
so that was a bad mistake.
We need to wrap up in a bit. I want to ask, what advice you would have given if you were to speak with, Yemi Cardoso, or of course you were in a room, to advise on, what possible steps must be taken, and also, do these things actually work in Nigeria? Because there's economic. I mean, if you go through universities, I'm sure that they'll teach you, okay, this is what you do to mitigate inflation. But is the Nigerian reality the type that textbook steps do not work?
Well, the Nigerian reality is the Nigerian reality. So for every country, their reality is different.
Yeah.
And you find, if you check the Asian tigers and China in particular, you find that the measures they took were unique to their own reality. So we need to do that. Nigeria's economy will respond to any economic theory, because we're not on Mars, we're on Earth. So it will work, but we have peculiarities that we need to factor in, and we're not doing enough of that. So for example, I would say, to answer your second question, to the CBN governor, as a matter of urgency, drag in diaspora remittances. We have, I can't remember the numbers, like 4 million Nigerians abroad. Most of them are doing tremendously well. Most of them. There are some that are, struggling and all that. But even the ones that are struggling, you find that compared to the reality we have at home, they can send in little bits and pieces of money, right? So what are the policy measures that we can put in place to bump up that number significantly in as quick a time as possible?
Yes.
The CBN is licensing 14 additional IMTOs, International Money Transfer Organizations. That's not going to do anything, because the problem is not access to those channels. The problem is that people don't see why they should bring their monies in, and that when they bring it in, they don't get commensurate value. So how do we address that problem is what the CBN needs to do. Because if you move diaspora remittances from circa $20 billion that it trends at now and move it to 40 billion, that's significant. It will move the needle significantly. And it's something that can happen quickly, because we're talking about human beings. So if you give them policy instruments, investment outlets, India has a very robust non-resident Indian investment program that they use to drag in investments from their diasporans.
Yeah.
So Nigeria needs to do something like that. And then we need to go back to our FPIs, the foreign portfolio investors, and beg them and give them reassurance. Cardoso made a mistake. He should admit it and bring these monies back in. The naira will stabilize again, and then we can continue to work on the long-term, medium-term to long-term measures to maintain that stability.
Well, I hope he's listening.
All right, Segun Sopitan, thank you very much for talking with us. We hope that beyond all this, that we start to see the practicality of it reflected in the prices of goods and services, because that's what the average man really is asking for.